Okay. Yeah, good morning, everybody, and apologies for all the delays. The delay is as a result of the computer getting freeze, and I had to rework it. So I decided to play the audio version of the talk I presented sometime biological or anthropology in the age of artificial intelligence. Anyway, like it has been announced earlier on today, we're supposed to be looking at the history of biological anthropology. And as you can see from the screen, what we are seeing here is a picture of a gentleman known as Charles Darwin, who has been very fundamental or who have made very fundamental contributions to our understanding and concept of evolution. And he was the one that propounded the theory of evolution through the process of natural selection. And as we can see here too, we can see the scale of hominin down to Homo sapiens. And I remember telling us from our last class that in this particular course, we will have to spend some two topics, looking at the evolution of man. But then again, if you look at the picture that is actually below them, appreciate the picture showing evolution down to the level of man, or what we call modern man, and then whether we are going to be replaced by robots or there is the fear. So that is what actually my talk about anthropology in the era of in the age of artificial intelligence is all about. So one of the days we will take some time to actually look at that. Now, one of the things that we should actually mention is the fact that the textbooks of physical anthropology may not be very common around this environment, but you can actually check on the internet, and then if you come across them in the bookstore, all you need to do is to just check and see if the book is actually adequate, covering essentially what we are going to be covering. So these are some few books that if you lay your hands on them, that will be excellent. Now, looking at the history of anthropology is actually segmented into seven periods, and as you can see here, the ancient roots are the differences and origins, then followed by the Renaissance, which is empiricism and science. Actually, we are taking this idea because anthropology as a science is also rooted from the contributions of several other disciplines and professions. Remember that anthropology is actually the study of man in times and space. So man has actually done so many things, and man has been contributing to so many events happening on the planet Earth. So from whatever perspective we are going to gather information and knowledge that contributes to the history of biological anthropology or anthropology as a whole. Then by the 17th century and the 18th century, the naturalism and man's place in nature is one of those. Then the fourth one is pre-Darwinian 19th century, which is actually talking about the racial origins. We will also take some time to look at that. Then there's what is called post-Darwinian 19th century evolution and racial origins. Then between 1900 to 1950, description and discovery. And then from 1950 to date, we have what we call the new physical anthropology. So for some of you who were in the class last time, we have actually taken some time to give a general introduction to anthropology. And what we saw is the fact that essential anthropology is made up of four major segments. The cultural anthropology is there, the biological anthropology, cultural archaeology is there, and then linguistic anthropology. So whatever you are seeing here, for instance, some of you may remember a picture like this that we watched in a video, talking about the culture of the people. We can see here is actually a picture showing archaeology. This one too is a picture showing archaeology. And then this one is a picture from the area of biological anthropology, particularly at the crime scene that we put under forensic anthropology. And here, body language. In Nigeria, for instance, body language was popularized by the former president, uh, Malam Muhammadu Buhari. Now, President Buhari was nicknamed go slow and all kinds of things. And I remember very well when issues were happening, they were saying, no, the body language of the president is this and stuff like that. So, yeah, he's actually a scientist in the mass spectrometry laboratory where he's actually trying to do some experiment, specifically dating. So, we have all kinds of things contributing to this idea. But then again, we'll go back a little and then we'll start looking at this idea from what we call the Middle Ages European religious view. Now, during that time, some of the things they actually beheld in their belief is the fact that the uh, fixity of species. And what they don't mean by that, they don't accept the fact that evolution actually took place or is taking place. And that is why they say that one, all species were created at the same time by God. There is no change or motion. The SH is based on the Bible. That's a literal interpretation. But then again, let's go back and look at the whole story. The Bible never told us that all creations were made at the same time because the Bible gave us step by step creation that took place in day 1 to day 6. So I don't understand what they meant. But you see, they can actually say this because they want to believe that the day that the Bible described in the Bible is actually a 24-hour period, which I remember telling very clearly and categorically that that is actually not the case. And I remember making reference to the Bible verse that talks about the fact that a day is like 1,000 years, to the Lord, and a 1,000 years is like a day. So let's keep that one in our mind. And that will also actually make sure that, remove the item number 3 from the idea that the earth is basically on the Bible now, because we cannot go. The Bible gave us the quantification of time as regard to a particular day. Then the other thing is the fact that there is a great chain of being. Life is by divine design. All species as a result of special creation. And then 3, every species that plays does exist. And then they added the idea that extinction is not just possible. But let's look at the last point. Every species that could exist does exist. Extinction is not just possible. Is that really true? That is not true. Why? Today, we are bombarded with this idea of endangered species. What are endangered species? Endangered species are species that are out to get extinct due to some issues. Those issues can be human, can be natural disasters, and stuff like that. For instance, whether we like it or not, dinosaurs were actually roaming the surface of this planet Earth. Today, they are no more. And when their skeleton were discovered and they dated back to 65 million years ago. Some people today will not want to accept the concept that is some animals have lived millions of years ago is not just believable by them. But whether we like it or not, we know that these are the issues. And our activities as human beings is also really, really affecting other animals, and it's leading those animals to extinction. I can give you a clear example. For instance, the population of gorilla in the world today is under very, very high protection. You know why? Because if people are allowed, they can kill the gorillas for food. So that is why the concept and the policy on endangered species were enacted in the countries where those animals are actually found. In the Cameroons, the mountain between Nigeria and Cameroons, there are a lot of gorillas there. And when we say a lot, we don't mean in thousands, or we just mean in several hundreds. And this is because the government actually stood up to protect these gorillas. Otherwise, gorillas will have actually gone extinct. We also have the bonobos, in central region of Africa, in Congo, Democratic Republic of Congo, and neighboring countries, where again people in that region are actually killing those apes for what we call bushmeat. So if they are allowed to continue, then the population of bonobos will also go into extinction. So the idea that extinction is impossible does not actually arise. Now, continuing the Middle Age European religion, with all species integrated in each other, and there is a hierarchy. There is no doubt about that. There is a hierarchy, and man is on the top. We don't have problem with that. The idea of evolution did not actually just come out of a vacuum, and it did not actually begin with Darwin, even though Darwin is actually the face of evolutionary theory today. But then again, another thing we also say is the fact that quite a number of people actually suffered for actually voicing their minds about certain views. That's why you can see we say people suffered and died in their quest for the truth. Now, on this other side is the phylogenetic tree, starting at the root here. You can see the ancestral protists, and then you can go over and over and over until you get to mammals, and then man, who is actually on top of the hierarchy. And you see the associated numbers, with all some of these image or some of the images. For instance, if you take man, for instance, you will see 25K. If you take this insect fly, you will see 17K. If you take this worm, earthworm, you will see 20K. If you take this fish here, you will see 28K. Total 27K and stuff like that. So what does that supposed to mean? These numbers are actually the approximated number of genomes, I mean of genes, that are found in these organisms. So like I've always said, from our previous classes, that's in genetics and then in molecular cell biology and molecular cell biology and genetics, we saw that the number of genes is not actually the issue, but we place emphasis on the quality of the type of protein that are being produced. Okay. Now let's start looking at individual contributions. Here we actually have Nicholas Copernicus, who actually lived in the 15th century. And one of the things he did is to say that the bodies, the heavenly bodies, the sun, the moon, and all the rest, actually stated categorically clear that time the sun and not the earth is the center of the universe. So what is the interesting thing here? The challenge he actually brought up at this point is the fact that we needed to tell them that, see, while we're placing emphasis on the earth and stuff like that, is not the center of the universe. What he did was to say the sun is actually the center of the universe. So now we have had somebody who is beginning to shift the general belief, from what existed. In the contemporary knowledge of astronomy today, what Nicholas Copernicus said is not necessarily correct. He has begun to guide people away from the tradition or the belief that the earth is the center of the universe. So today, the center of the universe, we cannot be able to tell. For me, I cannot be, maybe astronomers actually have the idea where the center of the universe is. But I'm also tell you this, that the universe is expanding on a constant basis. So if it's really expanding, how can you get a center of something that is expanding? It becomes a lot. I remember telling you from our last class that we are going to see the contributions of people like James Osher, who believe that they have actually calculated from the first day where the earth was actually created. So this is the picture of James Osher. He was an archbishop in Ireland. Actually, Osher was an archbishop of Armagh in Ireland. And he held the region that all the species created, at the same time by God and stuff like that. What do you expect? He was a religious authority, so he needed to actually promote the idea held by the religion at that time. And then all species, the result of special creation, we don't have problem with that. Now, but what we have problem with is the fact that all the species that exist does exist and extinction is not possible. That is where we have to deal with, because right before us, the species are getting extinct, and all species integrate with each other, and at the top is man. We don't have problem with that. Now, in 1658, he determined the age of the earth, or the day of creation, to actually be October 23rd, 4004 BC. He went down, 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 looking at the Bible, calculating, okay, from so thing to so thing. And it's not that the Bible actually stated it anywhere. Oh. It's actually based on presumptions. Okay, if so person is actually created and he lived this number of years, then he gave birth to this person, and this person lived this number of years until this particular thing event actually happened, e.g. the flood. So they are able to calculate the period of time from Adam's time to the Noah and then beyond. So they are able to put those things together and then came up with the idea that the day that the earth was actually created was 23rd, 4000 October 4004 BC. Then, following that quickly, one of the younger clerics at that time, known as John Lightfoot, doing his own work independently, look at the time and say, "Excuse me, Archbishop, it seems you have forgotten something. And what you have forgotten is the fact that the timing of the event. An event cannot just happen without a time. There must be a time, and I think that that time is actually o'clock in the morning. By the way, it looks plausible. You know what? Events that are actually like right today. What happens when we say we are going to have something like that? When is the thing happening? It starts from 9 o'clock and stuff like that. So maybe that is the idea that he had. That no, see, God created this earth actually in the morning as at 9 o'clock, October 23rd, 4004 BC. All right. Now, some other contributors actually came on the scene. And who are those contributors? People like Reverend John Ray, who you can see the picture here, was actually a naturalist lecturer at Cambridge University. Then in 1691, he stated the fact that the wisdom of God is manifested in the works of creation. Number two, had found marine fossils in mountains and thought that they contributed to Noah's Ark. Number three, devised as a breed population rather than physical similarity of members. And I remember telling you this in our last class. The fact that when you are actually seeing things that look together, that does not mean that they will actually be belonging to the same species. But actually, what makes a species a species is the fact that there are a breeding population. And I took some time to tell that even when they mate, what happens to the offspring? Are the offspring viable? Are they fertile? So we have instances of mules and stuff like that, and we know that they are actually not what? They are actually not fertile. And they are not fertile because they cannot actually do to what we call hybrid genesis. So the other person that has actually made some contribution is this person here that is called Nicholas Steno. Nicholas Steno today is actually nicknamed the father of modern geology and stratigraphy because he took some time to study the earth stratum. And what he did was that he was actually a Danish scientist pioneer in both anatomy and geology who became the Catholic bishop in his latter years. Then he made several investigations and subsequently concluded on fossil and rock formation, which led to scholars to consider him as one of the founding fathers of modern stratigraphy and geology. And his work on paleontology was started from the findings he gathered while examining shark teeth. And then St. Paul too beatified him in 1998. Now remember, he was a scientist, and then the next thing that he actually became a clergyman, and then got the beatification in 1988 as Saint Nicholas Steno. Next is Isaac de la Perre, who found chiefly Austin and hypothesized in a book the existence of pre-Adamic humans. And what was that supposed to mean? What that means is the fact that the book, well, I mean, is the fact that he believed that Adam was not the only human that was on earth. There have been some people that were before Adam. And when he mentioned that, he wrote in the book, they carried the book and burnt it publicly. Now, because it has actually gone contrary to the religious view that was held as at that time. Edward Tyson was an English anatomist and lived between 1650 to 1708. As you can see, he published the result of his dissection on the chimpanzee and found that the chimp or the chimpanzee should be remarkably similar to human. By the way, we don't have any problem. Even from the physical morphology, we can see similarities and stuff like that. And then by the time you dissect, you also see some basic similarities. And then we are not also worried. That is why they have been grouped under the same order primata. Like I told you the other time. Carolus Linnaeus, 1707 to 1778, 71 years life. And what did he do? He was actually a Swedish naturalist and he introduced the natural system that is called taxonomy. And this is actually used for classifying plants and animals. And today, that is why I can tell you this. If you go anywhere in the life sciences, identify um, animals and plants by their scientific names. So this is the guy that actually started the whole idea of systematics. And it was System of Nature published in 1758. He was supporter of his of species. Then every species a separate act of creation. So he moderated his views within the religious view that was held as at that time. So he never had any problem with the people. And Buffon was actually a French naturalist in 1749. Did his general work in 3 volumes, and then he hypothesized that the Earth was the result of comet crashing into the Sun and the Earth developed slowly. Now that is a comet crashing into the Sun, detached debris that got detached from the surface actually deformed and developed gradually into what we call the planet Earth. Some of the things he introduced were what we call binary. And that's to say that the same forces working today have worked in the past to cause the changes we are seeing today. In 1753, he was forced to retract his views in writing. Now, what are the things that we're talking about? The Natural History, Volume 4, the epochs of nature. One, estimated Earth might be 75,000 years old. Two, supporter of change, not clear on process of change. A. Why do so many species look similar? B. Why do organisms have anatomical structure without function? 3. Develop a microevolutionary theory. So these are very fundamental things that were actually established as at that time that people who have religious views will not really accept. Now, number one, remember Bishop James Osha of Armor have established the fact that the earth was created 23rd October 4004 BC. To date, that will have just been 6,000 years. But this man is actually saying that, excuse me, I think the earth is actually more than that. It can be up to like 75,000 years. So you can see it's a big deviation that we set us at that time. Then he questioned the idea that some animals actually have anatomical structure that doesn't seem to have function. So what has happened? Now we have what we call vestigial structures. And even in man, in our anatomical study of man, we can actually point to the coccyx, as a vestigial structure. I don't know whether you know that. This is supposed to be the extension of the tail in man that God atrophy and then disappeared, and the remnant is still there. Then There are changes occurring in us. That's why we call it microevolutionary theory. One of those quick is that blood group is actually an evolutionary, microevolutionary idea. If you are seated and listening, my blood group is A plus. As you are listening, one of you is B plus, one of you is B, one of you is A, and stuff like that. So, are we not all humans? Why are our blood groups different? So, that is what we call micro evolution. James Sutton, 1726 to 1797, was actually a Scottish geologist, and he promoted the idea of the theory of the earth. He was concerned with rock formation and stratification and presented this view through a gradual natural process. Rocks are created. Then earth is much more older than 4004 BC and introduced a very strict unitarianism view in opposition to catastrophism of Cuvier. Now, one of the interesting guys, that we cannot forget, which I also believe you have read from your 100 level biology, is this gentleman known as Jean-Baptiste de Lamarck. De Lamarck actually was a French naturalist, was a student of Count Buffon, and he was the supporter of change. In 1901, he actually published his work called Système des Animaux, that's the animal system. Then number one, offered transformational mechanism to account for Buffon's theory. Number two, he viewed the earth as older than the view of contemporaries. He said, he made a quote which I got for you to appreciate. He said, time is insignificant and never a difficulty for nature. It is always at her disposal and represents an unlimited power with which she accomplishes her greatest and smallest tasks. For me and you, we are the people racing against time. Oh no, you're some of you seated in this class, your parents send you to Bingham, not because they want you to go to Bingham, because they want to support. No, they just said that and say, see, if I send this child to University of Lagos or to Ahmadu Bello University or to University of Abuja, she may not graduate or he may not graduate on time. So I want him to go to a where he can graduate within the shortest possible time. So you see, we're racing against time. Nature does not have problem. That is why Jean-Baptiste Lamarck made this quote. Now, what are some of the things he did? In his book, Philosophy, Zoologic, and Natural History of the Invertebrate, proposed a mechanism by which animal might evolve and viewed evolution as powered by a will towards complexity. Now, these are all his beliefs and the things he held to be true. When organisms are forced with extinction to evolve and watch. Then number 7, the inheritance of acquired characteristics. So these are basically the things that Lamarck actually established, the inheritance of acquired characteristics. Now, how was he able to explain that? He was able to look at the giraffe and say, see, giraffe traditionally actually have short necks, but because of their constant want to eat the foliage of leaves, that are up, they continue to stretch their necks, stretch their necks, stretch their necks, and stretch their necks until the necks, because of constant stretching over time, it was able to elongate and then gives them the ability to eat from the top of trees and stuff like that. Okay, as at that time, this could actually stand to be true, but for today, we know that this does not actually hold true. His attempt to formulate a process culminated in these 4 laws. Number 1, the force of light tends to increase the volume of the body and to enlarge its part. New organs can be produced in a body when a new one or need is present. Number 3, organs develop in proportion to their use. Yes, we don't have problem with that. That's why bodybuilders are able to build their bodies, because of constant. Now, number 4, changes that occur in the organs of an animal are transmitted to their progeny. That is where there is actually a problem. Whatever is the thing that is acquired can never be transmitted to offspring. except the things that are actually constitutionally encoded in the genes. So these are the solutions of Jean Baptiste Lamarck. And today, Ali, we saw the great effort he has put in place for us to actually recognize. Then the next person, Johann Friedrich Blumenbach, 1754 to 1840, was a German naturalist, founder of physical anthropology, and the inventor of what we call craniology, which is the study of the cranium. And he actually used the idea to divide mankind into five races: one, American, Caucasian, Ethiopian, Malayan, and then the Mongolian. So today, we don't actually call some of them like this, but at least these are the initial classification that were put in place. So the next person is Georges Cuvier, French professor of natural history at the Collège de France, father of zoology, paleontology, and comparative anatomy. One of the interesting things he did was in 1796, he found bones of elephant and was able to put them together for exhibition. This is really interesting. You have never seen an animal before, but when you got the bones, with the use of his knowledge of biology, he was able to put these bones together for the process of exhibition. And that is what we can see in this particular picture that was actually quoted by Anderson. Show me the bone, reconstructing prehistoric monsters in 19th century Japan and America. Now, one of the things he did, or some of the things he did, insisted on fluidity theory, needed to account for fossil finds resulting from building and geological strata without contradicting religious views. How could extinction have occurred? And then, in opposition to evolutionary theory, we can see catastrophism theory, then we can see sudden changes in geological processes, that is the Great Flood, and then we can also see what we call natural catastrophe eliminating most of past life. World was restored, and then new species were added. So these are the religious beliefs that were held by, these are the general beliefs and theories that were proposed by George William. Then the other thing that we can also mention is that the person called William Stratham or William Smith. William Stratham, William Smith was an English surveyor, and in the work of canal construction noted good layers of ancient rock and fossil content, showing gradual succession of change. In 1815, he published a geological map of England indicating the similarities of fossil within strata across England. So, number three, he developed a technique for tracing what we call geological strata over large areas. So today, these ideas and techniques developed by this gentleman are actually the things that are being used today. Okay, sorry for the interruption. Uh, Charles Yale, 1797 to 1875, was a Scottish geologist. He contributed by writing what we call the Principles of Geology, which was published between 1830 to 1833. And he developed some ideas, in a position to prevail based on numerous detailed observations throughout Europe and North America. Was concerned with fossil as well as the earth strata. Then his idea of uniformitarianism, the same force working today worked in the past to cause changes, slow gradual changes occurred, synthesize growing accumulations of data, and then in 1863, he actually talked about the antiquity of man, which is a book he published, and the humans are older than scripture claims. Now, for your information, scripture did not claim anything. People actually claim for the scripture. And that is why, if we go back to the story of James Osher, who said that the earth itself was created in October 4004 BC, that is why Charles is basing his argument that humans are older than the scripture actually claims. The other person, which I suppose some of you should have heard, is this gentleman here known as Thomas Robert Malthus. Was an English clergyman. He published his book that is called An Essay on the Principle of Population, which revised edition was published in 1830. And what was his concern? Malthus was a political economist who was concerned about what he saw as the decline of living conditions in the 19th century England. So he looked at it very carefully and came up with three issues. Number one, the overproduction of the young. Number two, the ability of resources to keep up with the rising human population. And three, the irresponsibility of the lower class. Okay, if we look at these items one by one, the young men feel they are very strong, they could actually continue to produce, leading to larger population, forgetting the fact that this larger population needed to be catered for. And then three, the general irresponsibility of the lower class. What did you see today in Nigeria? What you see today in Nigeria is the fact that you get people who are actually young, actually at the lower level of the socioeconomic status, but they are the ones that have many children, and they will bragging with it. I have 10 children. What do you have? You have only 2 children and stuff like that. So you can see there's already a problem. And what is the problem? They are actually adding a lot of burden on the society, and that is why Robert Thomas Malthus called it irresponsibility of the lower class. So to combat this, Malthus suggested the family size of the lower class ought to be regulated such that poor families do not produce more children than they can support. Till today, we're having problem with this simple logic that Malthus proposed, especially among our Muslim friends in northern Nigeria. They believe that they must, because their Quran told them that they can marry up to 4 wives, they can marry up to 4 wives. And what is precipitating this irresponsibility again is the fact that dowry and the payment and the whole process of the wedding, is not expensive. You see, nothing to deter them. So a man can go out, and if he makes, in fact, if he goes out to somewhere and somebody dash 100,000, the next thing he may start thinking is that he wants to marry. The only thing that has changed a little now is the general and the economic problem that Nigeria is having. But I can assure you clearly that some few years ago, 100,000, a man getting 100,000 in a typical village in northern Nigeria is enough for him to go and marry another woman or another wife. So you can see how they have been contributing to up to this idea of the irresponsibility of the lower class. So you made a classical example with this particular family. This family, the mother is there and 7 children. The father is there. So if at the end of the day, each of these children now decide to say that, my family, we were 7 children. So me, I'm going to give birth to 7 children. So you can see issues. So that is how the idea will continue to transmit it over generation, and then you have population explosion that we cannot cater for. So the solution of rebel malthus is a very serious economic theory that actually help to save the mankind or human population. Otherwise, human population will have crashed. Now, the other person that said something interesting was James Carl Pritchard. James Carl Pritchard was actually an English anthropologist who proposed that Adam had been black. So what actually happened? So he argued that as the descendant of Adam became civilization. Right. What is that supposed to mean? He was looking at the whole story. They are white people, they are more advanced. But then you can see population of black people who are being brought from Africa and the rest. They look so primitive and their skin color is dark. Other people who are not white, also having both skin color, they are brought from somewhere, they are also primitive and stuff like that. So that made him to conclude that okay, maybe wait a minute, something is happening here. And what is happening is the fact that okay, as people begin to acquire lighter skin, why it comes with higher intellect and civilization. What did he do? He researched into the physical history of 36. British studied anthropology by meeting silos of many different races as they came to port in his hometown of Bristol. The strongest British spokesman for monogeism. What is monogeism? Monogeism simply means the belief that man actually originated from one source and co-founder of the Ethnological Society of London. So these are all the contributions of James Carl Pritchard. Samuel George Newton, he was physician from Philadelphia, polygenies, use of inferiority of African populations, and then measure cranial capacity and volume to assess differential worth, and then very careful technician published extensive list of measurements of the cranial capacity. Now see, let's go back to look at what he believed and actually. Number one, polygeist, he believes that humans actually emanated from different sources, which today we know that that is actually not true. Most correct is actually the idea that man actually originated from a single source. So some of those data from Newton's Russian ranking are actually shown here. So let's do the two people. Newton's on the first and the second row, and then Golf on the third row. And if you look at the summation, Caucasian 87, also Gulf 87, Mongolian 83, Gulf 87, Malays 81, Gulf 85, American 82, Gulf 86. Now, if you look at the Ethiopian, that's the Africans, according to Moton is 78, whereas according to Gold is what? So all the same, whether you accept or not, when you look at it, the submission from both researchers or scientists, actually what the lower ranking is actually found in the Africans. So let's move forward. Okay, Charles Darwin is one of the major figures. Boarded the Beagle with Yale's book. Remember Charles Yale, 1831. And by 1858, when Alfred Water announced the theory of natural selection to the Linnean Society. Remember Carius Linus? Now, the Linnean classification of organisms. So in 1859, also proposed the idea or submitted a book on the origin of species by means of natural selection. What are some of the things? Number one, he brought Yale's work with him on the beagle. Number two, he also included Lamarck's theory inheritance of acquired characteristics. Now, this is the beagle. And what is the beagle? It's a Royal Majesty ship. He named the beagle. So when he finished from college, and now when I say college, I mean university. So he was noting the ambition to actually become a clergyman. And during the time, he was actually trying to prepare and make up his mind to go to theology school. This particular opportunity came up. He thought, okay, they are hiring people, you know, who can actually go on this particular expedition and issues like that. So he went and applied, and then he was employed as an individual, and they are off to the island of Archipelago in Latin America. And that is how the whole story changed and began the idea of evolution by natural selection. Okay, remember some of the things we said. Descent of Man, published in 1871. Darwin's theory of evolution. Remember, we said the fact that Darwin is not responsible for the idea of evolution. It has been there before Darwin. Many ideas already existed regarding the issue of evolution. So, what are some of the things he actually presented? Number one, reproductive capacity is better than food supply. Remember the story of Robert Malthus? Number two, individuals will vary. Three, features survive the available food. Four, genetic advantage inherited. And then five, over time, natural selection leads to the creation or the evolution of new species. So what actually made Darwin to make these observations? Number one, domesticated plants and animals, they tended to deviate from the natural form in the wild. Number two, geographic distribution of lives. We actually look at the whole thing and discover that some species that can be found here can also be found in a distant connected environment. Number three, geological and paleontological records, have also indicated that there have been changes over time. Number four, comparative anatomy, the idea of vestigial structures and stuff like that, which we have seen earlier on. Number five, embryology. They have actually seen the fact that at some point in the embryological stage, all the animal species will look the same. And that is why there is a theory that says phylogeny recapitulates ontogeny. All right. If you look at comparative anatomy, for instance, look at the upper limb in the humans, in the cat, in the whale, and in the bat. Essentially, they are the same frame with some variation. And then the other thing we have talked about is the fact that we talked about domestication of plants and animals. If you look at this, you can see Teosante. Teosante is actually believed to be the source of modern maize. And this is as a result of the fact that man have domesticated Teosante. So through the ages, Teosante have actually transformed from something that look like grass to something that look like this. Now, let's look at this. In the local culture, e.g. northern Nigeria, they could actually process maize and cook it like rice. I don't know whether you know that. This used to be some kind of delicacy. In fact, they will process the maize, they don't grind it, they just process it, remove the husks, wash it, and then boil it, and then add beans so that it now becomes like rice and beans. And one of the things that you can actually notice is the fact that the taste of maize look like that of rice. So it's not surprising when you have your sentence, looking like rice head right from the beginning. Then the other thing is the embryological evidence. Now you see these are actually the species. You can see here is a fish. You can see here is actually a bat, a lizard. Sorry, you can see here is a bat chicken. You can see here as chimp, and then you can see human here. So if you look at it very carefully across, you'll be able to appreciate some level of similarity, in the embryological stages. So these are some of the things that enabled Charles Darwin to come up with this idea. But beyond that too, he has made quite a number of other observations. So one of those things he observed when he was on the island of Archipelago is the fact that there were some species of birds that are called finches. Now, these finches was believed to actually come from a common ancestor at the bottom here. You can see common ancestor from South American mainland. Now, this common ancestor actually gave rise to ground finches, genus Geosphaza, then three finches, genus Camaramichus, then Nuwabla finches, genus Catidia. Now you can see from each of these how they have actually radiated over time, and then you can see from this common ancestor, especially when you come to this particular stage, you can see their beaks have changed. You know, some have become pointed, some have become so large and stuff like that. And the idea is to be able to give them the ability to adapt to certain now. Remember, if there is not access to resources, that can lead to the clash of the population. So this particular evolution actually enabled this species to actually diversify to radiate out, and then so that they can be able to feed and then increase the scope of their resources. So the struggle for limited resources is not actually there. So these are some of the observations that Darwin actually made. Darwin also made observation on tortoise, and what actually happened was that some of those tortoises were actually labeled with his name, Darwin tortoises, as a book is written here, by Robert Stewart. But then again, I don't know how many of you know the story of the crocodile man. The crocodile man is actually a man that is actually in Australia. He was called a crocodile man because he was hunting crocodiles and stuff like that. So this is Steve with his wife and one of those tortoises from Darwin's time. You see, Charles Darwin brought back a 5-year-old tortoise named Harriet from the Galapagos Island that will be later owned by Steve Irwin. Harriet died in 2006 at the age of 176. Remember the story. The story is that tortoises are one of those organisms that have a very long lifespan. So for 176 years, this tortoise was alive until 2006. All right, natural selection in action. So what are some of the things that happened to Darwin? Darwin was unable to explain some of the things, so he decided to fall back on Lamarckian theory. And remember Lamarckian theory that stated the fact that when organisms use something part of their body over time, then it gets to be transmitted. We say no. While that body part may develop, it will not get transmitted. And, and so one of the things again, lack adequate theory of how variation could have been inherited. Mendel's contribution. So he actually fell back to Lamarckian theory. But then again, to buttress the fact that animals, now you can see fossils. These are fossils of different species. When you look at this, you yourself, you know that this is actually showing an animal that look like a lizard. If you see this one, you will see clearly a fish fossil. And then if you look at this one, you can see a bird. And then this one is the one that you may not know because there are some of the ancient species that are called trilobites. But any other person, whether educated or not educated, by the time you look at these three, four, at least this one is the most conspicuous and obvious. Everybody will know this one is a fish. This one we cannot be able to tell, but we know it's a reptile. But this one we cannot also be able to tell, but we know it looks like a bird. But this one we know is actually a fish. So trilobites are here, who have also been there for millions and millions and millions of age. One of the contemporaries and friends of Charles Darwin is Alfred Russel Wallace. Alfred Russel Wallace was English, presented the view of the survival of the best adapted. Remember, they presented some of the ideas with Charles Darwin to the Linnean Society. Then Gregor Mendel, 1822 to 1884, Austrian monk. And then the theory of dominant and recessive genes was published in the obscure local journal. And then by 1900, Gregor Mendel's law of genetics rediscovered by three different scientists. And that is why today we have accepted the Mendelian theory that was proposed earlier on. Paul Broca, 1824 to 1880, the world's first anthropological society established by founded in Paris. He had established an anthropological laboratory just a year earlier, which later became the site of training program for anthropologists. So that was the major contribution by the gentleman. Then the other thing we must also mention, remember we mentioned the fact that he is actually a surgeon. He is actually a neurosurgeon. He is the one that was able to identify the speech center. And that is why today we have what we call broken speech area. For some of you who are giving attention to anatomy, when we take the brain, you look at the lateral temporal lobe, we actually mentioned the fact that the broken speech area is located here. Okay. Ramboas, German physicist, founder of Columbia Department of Anthropology, responsible for growth studies being incorporated into anthropology. Today, we have what we call growth studies. And one of those persons that started this idea is Ramboas. But this idea of growth studies was really popularized by W.J. Turner. But Turner has done serious growth studies. In fact, they are the ones that transform the whole idea of growth studies into a field that is called oxology. Boas was a strong opponent of hereditarian arguments about the difference between races. He undertook migrant studies that documented anatomical plasticity in pairs that had long been viewed as quintessential component of race, e.g. skull measurements. First anthropology PhD in the US was a growth study done by one of his students. First anthropology PhD in the US. So that is why Flambeau actually holds a very dear place in the American Anthropological Society. So Framboas Award for Exemplary Service Anthropology Community Distinguished Service Award was established in 1976, and then a list of them up to 2015 you can see on the right side here. 2001 Arthur Kleeman, 2009 Jen Hill, 2014 and Michael Silverstein, 2015 Yolanda T. Moses. Now I have not actually updated this list because every year the award is actually given. The other person that also contributed tremendously and immensely is Elsa Durica, 1869 to 1943. Then at Brokers, remember Brokers Institute in Paris, 1896. Then brought Brokers idea to the US. And then he actually got the position at the Smithsonian Museum, where he directed anthropology between 1903 to 1950. For 40 years, he was director of anthropology there. So within this period of time, what was he able to do? Number one, he was able to train physical anthropologists, careful scientific tradition at the Smithsonian. Number two, he launched the American Journal of Physical Anthropology in 1918. This American Journal of Physical Anthropology is what I showed you the last time, has been renamed American Journal of Biological Anthropology. Then, founding member of the American Association of Physical Anthropologists in 1930, which also has been renamed American Association of Biological Anthropologists. So you can see his name, founded by us, Angelica, somewhere here. What are some of the things? He established the American Journal of Physical Anthropology, we have just seen. They were never able to realize his ambition to create the American Society of Physical. He wanted to create the American Society of Physical Anthropology, but he was able to stimulate the organization of the American Association that was established in 1930. Ernest also contributed to our knowledge of physical anthropology. He trained in classic, bachelor at Lawrence College in 1907, PhD at Wilkinson in 1911, then studied anthropology as a Rhodes Scholar in Oxford. Diploma in 1912 and Bachelor of Literature in 1913. He graduated his first doctoral In 1926, they produced so many students that went on to foster academic physical anthropology. And some of them, they are actually big names, as you can hear. Harry L. Shapiro, Carlton Kuhn, Arthur R. Kelly, William Howells, Frederick Hulse, Alice Bruce, the Wood Washburn was one of very notorious primatologists, Joseph Barcel, William S. Langley, others. So Gutenberg was accessible to the lay public in books like Up from the Apes, Man, and Morons. Now, one of the notorious students of Baker was Ernest Houghton was Paul T. Baker, was undergraduate in New Mexico, accepted into Harvard as one of Houghton's last students. Unfortunately, Houghton died before he graduated, and then he was able to complete his study under Howells. In 1956, he obtained the PhD and then established his research at Penn State University, where he became the anchor for strong physical anthropology program at Penn State. Today, Penn State University is one of the very central places, where anthropological study is being done. One of the very notorious persons from that department right now is actually Nina Jablonski. Nina Jablonski is the person that has been actually or that started the idea of skin color adapting to environment, and she became very notorious for that, and many other notorious anthropologists in that department. But what did Baker do? Baker went on to direct two major influential studies in the field of human biology, each lasting more than a decade and involving dozens of students. One of the things they did is to actually study high altitude now in what they call Man in the Andes, published in 1976, and then modernization, migration, and health, the changing Samoans. Sorry, what has happened to the Samoans? That is another story altogether. Then elected to the National Academy of Sciences, and then served as chair of anthropology between 1983 to 1986. Carl Pearson, anthropometry became more quantitatively sophisticated under the leadership of Carl Pearson, co-founder and editor of the journal Biometrica. This is the journal, and this is Carl Pearson. By the way, today we have a statistical test that we call Pearson correlation. So this is the Pearson of that correlation that we're speaking about. His name is actually Carl Pearson. Cro-Magnon, 1868, Cro-Magnon skeletons were found in cave. It was believed that it could actually have dated from 40 to 10,000 years ago. So you can see in the picture of some of the hominids and the accused consumption of that. So let's look at what we call the physical anthropology, which started in the 50s. Careful measurements and anatomical details were being put in place. This actually resembled in most aspects the science of the early 19th century to the women. In 1930s and the 40s, a host of biologists, paleontologists, and others contributed to the synthetic theory of evolution. And one of those events that occurred during that time was the fact that Raymond Dart actually was able to discover a skull that they call the town skull. This town skull is what today is identified as the skull of a of of Australopithecus. Now, the other study by Alfred Wegener was a German astronomer. So let's see what are the things. In 1912, proposed the idea of continental drift. In 1920, tired of opinion against it. But in 1960, organized theory of continental generally accepted along with plate tectonics. So let's look at the idea. This is the idea of plate tectonics. At some point, 250 million years, this is how the earth look like. The crust, you see the crust? All the crust, the earth crust, they are also almost assembled in one place in what is called the Pangaea. After 100 million years, there is a gradual drifting apart of this Pangaea, leading to formation of what we call Laurasia. You can see Laurasia northern part, and then you can see southern part known as Gondwana. Now, after 50 million years, you can see the emergence of the respective continents. North America, Asia, Europe, South America, Africa, India, blah, and then Antarctica and Australia. Then, after another 100 million years, you can see completely separated. The cross have been scattered all over the surface of the earth. So, where you will have to swim or trek across the other continent now is separated by body of water in thousands of miles, and you can use a plane to fly 10 of hours. If you start your journey, let's say from Lagos or from Abuja, you are going to Brazil, you are going to use like 12 hours for you to get there. It was a short distance for you to just walk across to the other continent, and then you can continue to move until you get to your destination. So in over 225 million years ago, what has happened? There is a complete separation of the earth crust and giving rise to the individual continent. Then the other story is the story of Heart of Africa. The Heart of Africa theory was actually started in a meeting, somewhere in 1987. You can see Rebecca Khan, Mark Kingston, and Alan Wilson, Mitochondrial DNA and Human Evolution, published in 1987. These are the two people, Mark Kingston and then Alan Charles Wilson. And what is the idea? The idea says that Homo erectus evolved from Homo sapiens in Africa and then ventured out of Africa and dispersed to all around the world. Then number two, the multi-regional evolutionary theory suggests that Homo sapiens ventured out of Africa and then evolved into modern man in several different locations throughout the world. So we have the Out of Africa theory, and then we have the multi-regional evolutionary theory. So what is the difference? The difference is that in one, the Homo sapien evolved into the Homo erectus evolved into Homo sapien in Africa before they went out of Africa. Number two, multi-regional, is that the Homo erectus went out of Africa to different parts of the world and eventually evolved into Homo sapiens. So what are some of the ideas that they were able using fossil records, DNA sequences, especially from mitochondrial DNA that are maternally inherited, therefore telling the story from the female side of human history. And then there's also the Y chromosome analysis in general complementing the mitochondrial DNA story. And then there's what you call the microsatellite DNA analysis, segment or randomly repeated DNA with a short repeat length, usually 2 to 5 nucleotides. Now, this is actually the depiction of this idea. Now, if you look at here, you can see the multi-regional theory. Remember, the multi-regional theory says defined that the Homo erectus evolved in Africa, went out to different parts of the world. So now look at this. There is a Homo erectus, African Homo erectus, European Homo erectus, Asian Homo erectus, and Indonesian Homo erectus, leading to all this. But for the Out of Africa theory, which was later accepted to be the truth or the correct one, is that African erectus evolved into what we call Homo sapiens. And the Homo sapiens now spread across the world. what we call modern Africans, modern Europeans, modern Asians, modern Australian Aborigines, and so on. So if you look at this particular map, you will appreciate here you have 100,000 years because this is the place that has the oldest history. Then out of that, you can see how they have spread across the world. You see, that's modern man. These yellow colors are modern man. The green colors will only find it in one region of the location in Europe. That's Homo neanderthals. And then the Homo erectus, you can actually find Homo erectus in Java, which dated 1.8 million. You can find Homo erectus in Asia, dated 1.9 million years. You can also find Homo erectus in Europe and the Middle East, which dated 1.5 million years. So this is actually giving the idea of the multi-regional. But like I told you today, we actually have the Human Genome Project is another milestone in the history of man or the story of man and space. This was actually a picture that was taken in 1989 after a meeting at Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory. These are notorious scientists that began the idea of sequencing the human genome. And what was the goal at that time? They said we needed to identify all the genes in humans, develop a genetic linkage map for human genome, obtain a physical map for human genome, develop technology for management of human genome, to know the functions of the genes, determine the sequence of the 3 billion chemical base pairs, store this information in public databases, develop tools for data analysis, and then transfer related technology to private sectors. So these are some of the things. Now, this human genome project is actually captured in this timeline. Far earlier, 1955, 1965, 1975, 1985, 1995, you can see what has been happening in 2005 and 2015, how many other ideas have actually come up to enrich the human or the human genomic timeline. So in 1984, when it was really remember in 1989, that is when this actually started. By 1994, you can see a laboratory where many people were there doing stuff. But you can see by 2006, DNA sequencing required much less manpower. The whole of this setup, only one person can go around, look at the equipment, and set them up. Like I was saying earlier on, what are some of the things, applications, and benefits? Human health will be improved, veterinary medicine will be improved, agricultural food and food development will increase, environment will be recycled and be remediated. Forensic justice and security has increased. Today we have established a suspect and we have convicted them based on data of DNA and stuff like that. You know, products have improved from industrial biotechnology and stuff. Now, recently in 2015, there was a discovery of a particular hominin species, Homo naledi. For some of you who were in the class last time, we saw it. And this is the picture. We saw that the skulls and similarities in the coven, they've been constructed, and we can see the face of Homo naledi, you know. And so this is actually a short video to show us some of those ideas. So let's watch it.
We do have our genus. What these discoveries are telling us is that there's a lot out there to be found. That we actually don't have the whole story of human evolution.
I mean, it looks like it might be a fragment of like the supraorbital torus or something.
Oh my God. The Homo naledi fossils are extraordinary in a wide variety of ways. We know they have the characters of an early member of the genus Homo. By comparing their morphology to other early hominids, we can see that we would place them right at the base of the lineage that leads to us. We've never seen a non-human that shares so many primitive and yet sometimes advanced characters. Tiny brain, curved fingers, but a generally human-like hand, long legs, and a human foot. You're looking at well over a dozen, in fact, probably around 18 different individuals, representing all different age spans, from near fetal age to senile individuals who were at the last stages of their lives. When I first saw these images by my exploration team, I knew that we had to act. The Rising Star Cave System is one of the best known in South Africa. It's been caved continuously for more than 50 years. I had this fossil lying on the surface, and I could see that it had been damaged. So I called National Geographic to put together an expedition, fast. The entrance is very, very difficult. To get to it, you have to move through a 7.5-inch slot, wiggling your way across sharp rocks before you drop into this remarkable little chamber. And the floor is quite literally comprised of parts of the bodies of these human ancestors.
Pushing that now on the team. Look at this. Whoa! Tell them they're a go to collect. All right. You got the fossil.
It appears, based upon the context that we have discovered this incredible assemblage of hominid fossils in, is that they were deliberately placed there by their next of kin after death. Homo naledi was doing something that until this moment we thought was unique to modern humans. That is, deliberate disposal of the dead. If this hypothesis holds true, that's an extraordinary thing. What Naledi has taught us is that there is clearly more out there that we didn't know.
Okay, that is a picture, a video from Homonolid. You can see the effort that has been put by Riveza and his team in trying to get into the root of the matter. You know, they were actually funded by National Geographic and other sources to be able to actually come up. Now, they are actually located at Wits University in South Africa. So now let's also look at this short
So in a
video.
cave in South Africa, scientists found fossils from a totally new species of ancient human called Homo naledi.
It's got a tiny brain with human-like arms, but an ape-like thorax and chest. The hands are a mix between very, very advanced human-like hands, but the fingers are curved. From mid-thigh down, it looks like a human. Long legs, human-like feet. Really a combination that we've never seen before in the fossil record.
2 years ago, a pair of amateur cavers came across the chamber really deep in this cave that held the fossils, and they notified scientists. This is located in South Africa. It's 30 miles northwest of Johannesburg. The two cavers, working their way through this cave, crawled through a really small opening called Superman's Crawl. After that, they climbed over a big jagged wall of rocks into a new chamber filled with stalactites. Keep in mind, this is totally pitch black, so they're exploring with headlamps, but they don't really have a clear idea of what everything looks like and what's going on. And then one of them noticed a tiny little opening, in some places less than 8 inches wide, that led to the chamber where the scientists ultimately found all these fossils. They had to hire basically really small cavers, 6 different women who could crawl through this tiny little space. And in total, they've excavated more than 1,500 pieces of fossils so far. This find included fossils from 15 different individuals of this species, which is just an absolutely huge discovery. There was a couple infants, a bunch of juveniles, one particularly old individual.
And I suppose most surprising is what they were doing in this chamber.
The conclusion, though it's not certain, is that their relatives might have been putting them there on purpose after they died. In National Geographic's cover story about this discovery, Jamie Shreve details how the scientists eliminated all their possibilities to figure out that likely these were intentional burials. So there's no tooth marks on the bone. It doesn't really seem like predators dragged these bodies in. There's no evidence that water carried them in. That would be a big deal just because right now the oldest clear evidence of intentional burial is 100,000 years old, and that's Homo sapiens. So this would predate it by maybe millions of years if it's accurate.
Okay, so after all discovery and hypotheses that have been put in place to explain how the collection of these bones were found in one place, then the other thing you should also be able to appreciate is the fact that the bones are never found intact. They are found, already broken into pieces and stuff like that. So they have to use their knowledge, of anatomy to try to see if they can identify arrangement and stuff like that. So remember the skulls, even the skulls were never found intact. So that is why they needed to be reconstructed before the real facial reconstruction will take place. So this next video is going to show you the
We've all seen crime investigation shows where they find a